In the 13th century, one army had never been defeated. Not once. The Mongols had destroyed the largest empires on earth. The Abbasid Caliphate gone. The Kievan Rus gone. The Song Dynasty of China gone. Poland, Hungary, Persia, all crushed within decades. Every general who faced them lost. Every city that resisted was burned. Every empire that stood in their path was erased from history. By 1260, the Mongols controlled more land than any force in human history, and they were still moving west. The next target was Egypt. Nobody had stopped them before. Nobody believed anyone could. Then came the Battle of Ain Jalut, and everything changed. To understand why Ain Jalut mattered, you need to understand what the Mongols actually were. This wasn't just a large army. This was the most sophisticated military machine the medieval world had ever produced. Genghis Khan had built it from nothing, uniting the nomadic tribes of the Mongolian steppe into a single unstoppable force. His innovation wasn't just numbers. It was speed, discipline, and psychological warfare. The Mongols moved faster than any army of their time. They could cover 80 miles a day on horseback, 3 times what a European army could manage. They used feigned retreats to lure enemies into traps. They used terror as a weapon. Cities that surrendered were spared. Cities that resisted were massacred to the last person. The message spread faster than the army itself. By the time the Mongols arrived at your walls, you already knew what had happened to the city before yours. After Genghis died, his successors continued the expansion. His grandson Hulagu Khan was sent west in 1253 with the largest Mongol army ever assembled, tasked with destroying the Islamic world. In 1258, Hulagu sacked Baghdad. The Abbasid Caliphate, the center of Islamic civilization for 500 years, was annihilated in 2 weeks. The libraries were burned. The canals were destroyed. The caliph was executed. It was one of the most devastating events in human history. Then Hulagu turned toward Syria. Aleppo fell. Damascus fell. The road to Egypt was open. Nothing had stopped them. Nothing could stop them, or so everyone believed. But Egypt was different. The rulers of Egypt in 1260 were the Mamluks, and they were unlike any enemy the Mongols had faced before. The Mamluks were slave soldiers, taken as children from the steppes of Central Asia and the Caucasus, often the same regions that produced the Mongols themselves. They were trained from youth to be the most elite warriors in the Islamic world. Mounted archers, swordsmen, tactical geniuses, they had been born to fight. And unlike the armies of Persia, Baghdad, or Syria, they had not been broken by decades of Mongol psychological terror. Their leader was a general named Qutuz, a former slave who had fought his way to the Sultanate of Egypt, ruthless, calculating, and utterly committed to stopping the Mongol advance. When Mongol envoys arrived in Cairo demanding Egypt's surrender, Qutuz did something no ruler had dared to do. He executed them. It was a declaration of war, a statement to the entire Islamic world Egypt would not bow. Qutuz assembled his army and marched north into Palestine to meet the Mongols head-on. On September 3, 1260, the two armies met at Ain Jalut, a spring in the Jezreel Valley in modern-day Israel. The Mongol force was commanded by a general named Kitbuka, a veteran of the Baghdad campaign, experienced and confident. He had every reason to be. His army had never lost. Qutuz gave command of the advance guard to his most brilliant general, a man named Baybars. Baybars had fought the Mongols before. He knew their tactics, and he used that knowledge to set a trap. The Mamluk advance guard engaged the Mongols, then retreated, exactly as the Mongols themselves had done 100 times before. Kitbuka, confident in victory, ordered a full pursuit. He rode straight into the ambush. Qutuz had hidden the bulk of his army in the hills surrounding the valley. As the Mongols charged in pursuit of Baybars, the Mamluk army emerged from 3 sides. The Mongols, for the first time in their history, found themselves surrounded. The battle was brutal. At one point, the Mongol left flank broke through and Kutuz himself rode into the fighting, throwing his helmet to the ground and rallying his men personally. By the end of the day, the Mongol army was destroyed. Kitbuka was captured and executed. The invincible army had been defeated. The impact of Ain Jalut was immediate and profound. Syria, which had fallen to the Mongols just months before, was liberated. The Mongol garrisons were expelled. The westward expansion, which had seemed unstoppable, halted permanently. The Mongols never again mounted a serious invasion of Egypt or North Africa. Baybars, the general who had set the trap, used his victory to seize power from Kutuz, assassinating him shortly after the battle and becoming Sultan of Egypt himself. He would go on to build one of the most powerful states in the medieval world, fighting off both Mongols and Crusaders for decades. But the deeper significance of Ain Jalut goes beyond Egypt. When Hulagu had marched west, he had received news that the great Khan monk had died back in Mongolia. A succession crisis was brewing. Hulagu had left only a fraction of his full force in Syria under Kitbuka. The bulk of his army had already turned east, which means the force that Baybars defeated at Ain Jalut was not the full Mongol army. Historians still debate what would have happened if it had been. What we know is this: Ain Jalut was the first time the Mongols were defeated in open battle. Proved they could be beaten. It shattered the myth of Mongol invincibility, and it stopped the western expansion of the greatest land empire in history. The Battle of Ain Jalut is one of the most consequential battles ever fought, and one of the least known. If the Mongols had won, Egypt would have fallen. North Africa would have followed. The Islamic world, already devastated by the destruction of Baghdad, might never have recovered. Europe, exhausted from the Crusades and still rebuilding from the Mongol raids of the 1240s, would have faced an enemy unlike anything it had encountered. Instead, Ain Jalut drew a line. The Mongol Empire continued to exist, fragmenting into separate khanates over the following decades, but its westward expansion was over. The world it might have created was never built. One battle, one valley, one army that refused to surrender, and the course of history changed forever. If you want to know what happened next, how the Mongol Empire finally collapsed from within, that story is coming. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next war.